My husband died at 4:17 in the morning on a Tuesday in October. His hand in mine, his breathing reduced to nothing more than the spaces between seconds. His last words, whispered so faintly I had to put my ear against his lips to hear them, were "check the attic." Not "I love you," which we'd already said 1,000 times in the weeks leading up to this moment. Not a message for our daughter who was sleeping in the hospital chair with her head on my shoulder. Just 3 words that made no sense and everything sense all at once. Check the attic. I didn't check the attic that day, or the next, or for 29 days after that. I couldn't. Had a funeral to plan, a daughter to hold together, a house full of memories to learn how to breathe inside without him. The attic, that dusty, forgotten space we used for Christmas decorations and boxes labeled "someday," seemed like the least important place in a world that had just collapsed. But on day 30, when the casseroles finally stopped arriving and the sympathy cards had been answered and the silence in our house became so loud I couldn't think, I remembered. Check the attic. I climbed those narrow stairs with my heart pounding, pulled the cord to turn on the single bare bulb, and found something that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my husband, and the life we'd built together. My name is Lorraine Carter. I'm 53 years old, a high school English teacher, a mother, and as of 30 days ago, a widow. Was married to James Carter for 28 years. We met when I was 25 and he was 27. Both of us young and broke and convinced that love was enough to build a life on. We were right, mostly. We built a good life. A brick house in a neighborhood where people still waved from their porches. One daughter, Angela, who inherited his laugh and my stubbornness. Sunday dinners. Wednesday movie nights. The kind of ordinary happiness that doesn't make good stories but makes a good life. James worked in IT. The kind of job that sounded vague when you tried to explain it at parties but paid well enough that, I could teach without us worrying about money. He was quiet, steady, the kind of man who fixed things without being asked and remembered to buy flowers on no occasion at all. Our marriage wasn't perfect, what marriage is, but it was ours. And I never once questioned whether I'd made the right choice. Until he got sick, it started with fatigue he blamed on work stress. Then weight loss he blamed on finally getting serious about his health. Then the cough that wouldn't go away, the shortness of breath, the night sweats. By the time he admitted something was wrong and I dragged him to a doctor, the lung cancer had already spread to his liver and bones. Stage 4, the oncologist said, and the number felt like a door closing. We can treat it, slow it down, but at this stage, we're talking about quality of life, not cure. James took the news the way he took everything, quietly, with a nod like the universe had just handed him a difficult problem to solve. How long? He asked. 6 months? Maybe a year with treatment? He got 8 months. 8 months of chemo that made him sicker than the cancer. 8 months of watching him shrink into a version of himself I barely recognized. 8 months of learning to say everything important because soon there would be no more time to say anything at all. He worked almost until the end, insisting he needed something to focus on besides dying. I'd find him at 3 a.m. at his desk in the study, typing on his laptop, papers spread around him like he was cramming for a test he couldn't afford to fail. When I asked what he was working on, he'd say, "Just tying up loose ends at work," and change the subject. 2 weeks before he died, James asked to go home from the hospital. "I want to die in my own bed," he said, "with you next to me." So we brought hospice in. They set up equipment in our bedroom, oxygen, monitors, medications with names I couldn't pronounce. Our daughter Angela flew in from Seattle, took leave from her job, and moved into her old room. The 3 of us lived in a strange suspended time where every day felt like the last day and also like it might go on forever. James drifted in and out of consciousness those final days. Sometimes he'd wake up lucid, asking for water or wanting to hear about Angela's life in Seattle. Other times he'd wake up confused, asking for his mother who'd been dead for 10 years, or talking about projects at work that didn't exist. The night he died, he woke around 2 a.m. He looked at me with clear eyes, more present than he'd been in days. "Lorraine," he said, his voice rough but certain, "I'm here." Baby, I need to tell you something, okay? I held his hand, grateful for this moment of clarity, expecting him to say he loved me, or that he was scared, or that he was ready. Instead, he said, check the attic. What? After I'm gone, check the attic. There's something you need to see. Roar. James, what are you talking about? Promise me, he said, urgent now, his grip on my hand surprisingly strong for someone so frail. Promise me you'll check the attic. Promise, I said, because what else do you say to a dying man asking for promises? He relaxed back into the pillow, satisfied. I love you, he said. Tell Angela I love her too. We love you, I said. And Angela, waking in her chair, echoed me. We love you, Dad. He smiled. He closed his eyes. And over the next 2 hours, his breathing slowed and slowed and slowed until it stopped. The funeral was on a Friday. Our church was full. James had been quiet, but he'd been kind, and kind people gather crowds when they die. His coworkers came, our neighbors, my colleagues from school, Angela's friends from childhood who'd known. James as the dad who built tree houses and taught them to change tires. I stood at the front of the church. I gave a eulogy. I don't remember writing. I talked about the man I married, the father he was, the way he loved without grand gestures but with consistent presence. I didn't mention the attic. It felt private, strange. It's possibly meaningless, the last confusion of a dying brain. The week after the funeral, Angela helped me sort through James's belongings. His clothes, which still smelled like him. His books, margins filled with notes in his neat handwriting. His desk, where we found folders full of work documents, printed emails, project plans. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained his last words. Do you think Dad was just confused at the end? Angela asked one afternoon, folding one of his sweaters. Maybe, I said, but I didn't believe it. James had been clear when he told me to check the attic. Whatever was up there mattered. Then why haven't you looked? Angela pressed. I don't know, I admitted. I'm scared, I think. Of what? Of finding something I don't want to find. She put down the sweater and sat next to me on the bed. Mom, it's Dad. Whatever's up there, it's from Dad. It can't be that bad. I wanted to believe her. But there's a reason mystery is both terrifying and magnetic. Once you know, you can't unknow. And some part of me wanted to preserve the version of James I'd built over 28 years. The steady husband, the good father, the man with no secrets. On day 29, I got a phone call that changed my resolve. Double quotes, Mrs. Carter. A woman's voice, professional but tentative. This is Michelle Park from James's office. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you, I said automatically. I'm calling because we're closing out James's final projects and there's some confusion on our end. He submitted a large file transfer request the day before he stopped working. But the files are password protected and we can't access them. We were hoping you might know the password. What kind of files? I asked. We're not sure. They're labeled personal archive. We assume they were work-related since he used his company account. But without the password, we can't verify. Personal archive. I felt something shift in my chest. I don't know the password, I said, but I'll look through his things and get back to you. When I hung up, Angela was watching me. What was that about? I told her. She frowned. Personal archive. That doesn't sound like Dad. He kept everything separate. Work was work, home was home. I know. Do you think it's related to the attic? I think it's time to find out. That evening, after Angela went to bed, I stood at the bottom of the attic stairs. The pull-down ladder was old and creaky, the kind James had been meaning to replace for years. I climbed slowly, my heart beating too fast for the minimal physical exertion. The attic smelled like dust and cardboard and time. The single light bulb cast harsh shadows. Boxes were stacked along the walls, Christmas ornaments, Angela's baby clothes, tax documents from a decade ago. In the far corner under the eave where the ceiling sloped lowest, I saw something that didn't belong. A metal filing cabinet. Gray, industrial, completely out of place among the cardboard and plastic bins. I'd never seen it before. I picked my way across the attic carefully, testing each beam before putting my weight down. When I reached the cabinet, I saw a combination lock on the front. 3 numbers, like a gym locker. I tried James's birthday, nothing. Angela's birthday, nothing. Our anniversary. The lock clicked open. Inside were 4 drawers. I opened the top one. Files, dozens of manila folders, each one labeled with a name and a date. I pulled one out at random. Thompson. Marcus minus 2019. Inside were documents, bank statements, mortgage papers, medical bills, all belonging to someone named Marcus Thompson. None of it made sense. I opened another file. Rodriguez Alina 2017. More documents, credit card statements, utility bills, legal papers, and another, Chen. David minus 2020. The same pattern. I sank to the floor, files spilling into my lap, and tried to understand what I was seeing. My husband, my steady, honest husband, had a filing cabinet full of strangers' personal documents hidden in our attic. Was he stealing identities? Running some kind of fraud? 28 years of marriage, and I'd married a criminal. My hands shook as I opened the second drawer. More files going back years. 2015, 2012, 2008. Dozens of names I didn't recognize. The third drawer had something different. A large envelope labeled simply, "For Lorraine," my name in James's handwriting. I opened it with numb fingers. Inside was a letter, several pages long, written on James's personal stationery, and beneath that a USB drive. I took everything downstairs, made coffee I didn't drink, and sat at the kitchen table under the too bright overhead light. Then I started reading. My dearest Lorraine, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've kept your promise to check the attic. I'm sorry for the shock. I'm sorry for the secrets. But most of all, sorry I never found the courage to tell you this while I was alive. The filing cabinet contains records of 43 people whose lives I saved, though they'll never know it. Let me start at the beginning. When I was 23, before we met, I worked for a tech startup that developed early encryption software. The company went under, but I kept the source code. For years, it sat unused on an old hard drive. Then, when I started my career in IT, I realized something. The systems we build, the networks we maintain, they're full of holes. And people with bad intentions know where those holes are. About 15 years ago, was doing contract work for a financial services company when I discovered a breach. A sophisticated one. Someone had infiltrated their system and was siphoning customer data, social security numbers, bank accounts, credit information. Thousands of people. The company didn't know. The customers didn't know. But I knew I reported it through proper channels. I documented everything. And then I watched the company bury it. They fixed the breach quietly, but they never notified the affected customers. Why? Because notification means lawsuits, means reputation damage, means stock prices falling. They chose profit over people. That's when I started the archive. I couldn't unbury what the company had buried, but I could track the stolen data. I could monitor the dark web marketplaces where that information ended up. And when I saw someone's identity being sold, being used to open fraudulent accounts or take out loans or commit crimes, I could act. I couldn't stop it legally. I had no standing, no authority, but I could stop it technically. I developed a system using that old encryption software that would flag fraudulent activity and reverse it before it caused permanent damage. I'd intercept credit applications before they were approved. I'd alert fraud departments anonymously. I'd submit counterclaims that would tangle the fraudsters in red tape long. Enough for the legitimate owner to notice and act. The files in the attic are my records. Every person whose data I protected, every fraudulent transaction I stopped. 43 people over 15 years. I tracked their lives not because I wanted to invade their privacy, but because I needed to make sure the protection held, that the fraudsters didn't find another way in. You're going to ask why I didn't tell you. The answer is complicated and simple at once. What I was doing wasn't technically legal. I was accessing systems without authorization, even if my intentions were good. I was committing crimes to prevent crimes. If anyone ever found out, I could have gone to prison. And I couldn't risk that happening to you and Angela. So I kept it separate, hidden. A second life you knew nothing about. The USB drive contains my complete methodology, the software, the protocols, the access routes. I'm giving it to you not because I expect you to continue what I started, but because you deserve to understand what I did and why. You're going to feel betrayed, and you're entitled to that. You married a man you thought you knew completely, and it turns out he had a massive secret. But Lorraine, I need you to know, I never lied to you about the things that mattered. I loved you completely. I was faithful to you always. I was the father Angela needed. The only thing I hid was this compulsion to fix what I could fix, even when the world said to look away. I'm not a hero. Heroes don't operate in secret. But I'm not a villain either. I'm just a man who saw suffering he could prevent and decided that mattered more than following every rule. The cancer diagnosis changed things. I realized I needed to close the archive properly. I couldn't leave active interventions running with no one to monitor them. So in my last months, working through the pain and the fog of medications, I systematically shut everything down. I secured the data. I closed the back doors. The 43 people in those files are safe now. Their information scrubbed from the places where it shouldn't be. But I couldn't destroy the records themselves, because these people deserve to know. Not now, the shock would be too much. The questions too complicated. But someday, maybe. When enough time has passed and the statute of limitations has run out on whatever laws I broke, someone should tell them. You should tell them if you choose to. Or you can burn it all and let my secret die with me. That's your decision, and I'll accept whatever you choose. I love you, Lorraine. I loved you from the moment I met you until the moment I died. This secret doesn't change that. I hope when you've had time to process this, you can believe that. Yours always, James. I read the letter 3 times. Then I opened my laptop, inserted the USB drive, and spent the next 4 hours going through files that proved everything James had written. Transaction logs, system access records, encrypted communications, and most compelling correspondence between James and fraud prevention departments, where he'd anonymously submitted evidence that stopped fraudulent accounts before they could do damage. All time-stamped, all documented, all real. My husband had been a vigilante, a cyber guardian angel, a criminal committing crimes to prevent worse crimes. And he'd done it for 15 years without me suspecting a thing. I felt everything at once: betrayal, pride, confusion, grief, awe. The man I'd buried a month ago was both exactly who I thought he was and a complete stranger at 3 a.m. Angela found me still at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. "Mom, what's wrong?" I handed her the letter. I watched her face as she read confusion, shock, understanding, tears. "Dad did this," she whispered, "for 15 years. Apparently, did you know? Even suspect." "Never." She set down the letter carefully, like it might break. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." Over the next week, I did something James never did. I researched. I contacted a lawyer specializing in cyber law and asked hypothetical questions about someone who accessed systems without authorization, but only to prevent fraud. The lawyer said, hypothetically, that person would face serious legal consequences if caught. They'd also probably be hailed as a hero by the people they helped, which would mean nothing in court. I contacted a cybersecurity expert, Angela knew from work, and asked him to review James's methodology without telling him where it came from. He spent 3 days analyzing the code and came back with an assessment. Whoever built this was brilliant, elegant, and careful enough that I can't find a single instance where they accessed information they didn't need or caused harm they couldn't justify. Finally, I did what James had clearly wanted me to do. I looked up the people in the files. Marcus Thompson was a teacher in Florida. According to his Facebook, he was married with 2 kids and posted photos of fishing trips. In 2019, right when James's file was dated, I found a brief mention in his posts. Weird thing happened, got a notice about a credit card application I never made. Fraud department caught it before it went through. Dodged a bullet. James had been that fraud department. Alina Rodriguez was a nurse in Texas. Her file was from 2017. I found an article about her from that year. She'd been featured in a local paper for her volunteer work at a free clinic. The article mentioned she'd recently recovered from a stressful financial situation that turned out to be a case of identity theft, thankfully resolved before major damage occurred. James had been that resolution. David Chen ran a small business in Oregon. His file was from 2020. I found his company's website, which had a blog. In a post from 2020, he'd written about business challenges during the pandemic, including, and just when I thought things couldn't get worse, someone tried to take out a business loan in my company's name. Luckily, it was flagged and stopped. Sometimes you catch a break. James had been that break. I went through all 43 files. I found most of the people on social media or through public records. Some were thriving. Others were struggling in the ways people do. But none of them had been destroyed by identity theft. None of them had lost their homes or their savings or their reputations to fraud. Because my husband, in secret, had been watching over them. He was protecting people, Angela said, when I showed her what I'd found. Like a real-life superhero. A really nerdy, behind-the-scenes superhero. He was breaking the law, I countered. Stop other people from breaking worse laws. She looked at me seriously. Mom, if you found out about this while he was alive, would you have made him stop? I thought about it honestly. I don't know. I would have been terrified for him. For us. But would I have insisted he let people suffer when he could stop it? I don't know. 2 months after finding the attic files, I made a decision. I couldn't continue what James had done. I didn't have the technical skills or the stomach for the legal risk, but I could honor it. I started a scholarship fund in James's name for students studying cybersecurity with an interest in ethical hacking and fraud prevention. I funded it with James's life insurance money. On the application, included a quote from an anonymous source. The world needs people who see problems others ignore and have the courage to fix them, even when the fix is complicated. I also wrote letters. 43 letters to 43 people. I didn't send them yet. The lawyer advised waiting until statutes of limitations expired on James's unauthorized system access. But I wrote them, explaining what James had done, providing them with the files that pertained to their cases, giving them proof that someone had watched over them when they were vulnerable. In 2024, when it's safe, the lawyer said, you can send those letters. Until then, keep them sealed. So I keep them in the filing cabinet, in the attic, waiting for the day when I can tell 43 strangers that my husband broke the law to save them. Angela went back to Seattle, but she calls more now. We talk about James differently than we did before, as the simple, steady man we thought we knew, but as someone more complicated, someone who contained multitudes. Do you think he was wrong to keep it secret? She asked on one of those calls. I think he was scared, I said. And maybe he was right to be. If I'd known, I would have worried every day. I would have imagined FBI raids and prison sentences. He spared me that. But he also took away my choice to stand beside him in it. Would you have? Angela pressed. Stood beside him? I married him, I said, for better or for worse. This was definitely worse. But it was also better. Yes, I would have. Teaching English to teenagers, you spend a lot of time talking about moral complexity in literature. The heroes who aren't pure. The villains who aren't evil. The gray spaces where most actual humans live. I thought I understood that abstractly. Then I found out my husband had been living in that gray space for half our marriage. And I had to understand it personally. What James did was illegal. It was also necessary in the way that sometimes following the spirit of justice means breaking the letter of the law. He saved 43 people from having their lives destroyed. He did it alone, in secret, at great personal risk. He died without recognition or thanks, and I'm simultaneously angry at him for lying. by omission and devastated that the world lost someone willing to do what he did. 6 months after finding the attic files, I added something to his gravestone. Originally, it just had his name, dates, and beloved husband and father. I had them engrave a new line. He fixed what he could. People who visit probably think it means he was good with his hands, that he could fix a leaky faucet or a broken door. I know it means something deeper. He fixed what he could in a world that was often broken in unfixable ways. He wasn't perfect at it. He wasn't entirely right in how he did it. But he tried. And for 43 people, his trying made all the difference. Last week, I got another call from Michelle Park at James's old company, Mrs. Carter. I wanted to let you know we finally accessed those encrypted files James submitted. They were work-related after all documentation of security vulnerabilities he'd discovered over the years. His notes have helped us patch several serious holes in our systems. I just wanted to say, your husband was incredibly talented and more thorough than anyone realized. Thank you, I said. He was. After I hung up, I climbed the attic stairs again. I sat next to the filing cabinet and ran my hand over the cool metal. You covered your tracks, I said aloud to the ghost of my husband. Even at the end, you were protecting your work and protecting me. The attic didn't answer, but in the silence, I felt something like peace. James Carter died at 4:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, asking me to check the attic. What I found there 30 days later was unbelievable. Not a scandal, not a betrayal, but a secret life dedicated to protecting strangers. A hidden heroism that broke laws in service of a higher law. I found proof that the quiet man I married, the steady father, the dependable husband, contained depths I never suspected. That his last act was to trust me with a truth he'd protected for 15 years. That he believed I was strong enough to understand, wise enough to forgive, and careful enough to safeguard what he'd built. He was right. I am all those things, because he spent 28 years showing me how to be steady, careful, brave. He taught by example. Even when I didn't know what the example was for, I still have the USB drive. I still have the files. And in 2024, when the statute of limitations expires, I'll send 43 letters. I'll tell 43 people that once, when they were in danger, a man they never met protected them. That he asked for nothing. That he died without them knowing. And that his wife wants them to know now, because everyone deserves to know when they've been loved from a distance. That's what James's last words gave me. Not a mystery to solve, but a love to understand. A complicated, imperfect, illegal, beautiful love that saw suffering and said, "Not on my watch." "Check the attic," he said. So I did. And I found a man worth missing even more than I already did.